I've been in a Pokemon mood lately. I've been thinking a lot about Pokemon. I've been ruminating on Pokemon, talking about it with people, just generally being excited about both the past and future about Pokemon. Um, and so I felt, why not talk about it in a video where I don't believe I've talked about my relationship with Pokemon before and about Legends Arceus, but I've not really talked about my feelings on the series and my rankings of games I've played in different generations and such. So I figured let's just do that today. I think it's a fun topic. I have lots of fun talking about it. And yeah, let's go for it. Now, if we're starting at the bottom, I guess let's just get this out of the way. I have a very distinct feel for what I look for in a Pokemon game more than anything else, and it is setting, like, a really great spirit and quality in the setting-based storytelling. The regions, the towns, the NPC dialogue, the different culture of each town and how they contribute to one another and integrate, and then integrate with the overall region and the themes of the story and how they integrate with the themes of the region through its culture. The aesthetics of the culture, the music, the aesthetics of the region and the towns, the music, the geographical transitions, stuff like that. Everything to do with settings, I am there with Pokemon, and I think that the story is told through the spirit of the setting, in the best Pokemon games. So I won't spoil it for anyone who's unaware. I mean, this list is available on my backlog, you can just view it now, but I'm gonna go through them, individually anyway. Actually, let me just quickly fix this up, fix the view of it up. There, that's a bit better. So boom. Number 20. I'll let you know, most of these games I actually think, I don't want to spoil too much about this list, but I guess, well, you guys, it's not a spoil. A lot of you guys know this. A lot of my obsession with Pokemon's one of the most important series to me. Even though I think personally a lot of the beauty of its games has kind of dwindled for me in the past, when it comes to modern Pokemon, let's say the past 10 years or so. But longer than that, maybe like 14 or so years or something, but specifically, let's talk about the last 8 to 10 years. Because of that, I have in modern times felt less close with it, but it still is one of my absolute favorite video game series of all time. It's one of the most important series to me, and I'll never stop loving Pokemon. And hey, if every Pokemon game we get from now until the end of my life is trash, I will still love Pokemon, because of what it did for me. And I guess what I want to say is, most games here, even in spite of that, are competent games. I think are at least decent games. But if we start with Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, I think these games are really bad. I think these are phoned-in remakes. Do they have little bits of charm here and there? Sure. Which is why I wouldn't give them like a 1 out of 10. I'd instead give them like a 2.5 out of 10 or so. But they are incredibly phoned-in, cheap, lazy remakes. I'm not saying the people who worked on them are lazy, I'm saying the final product comes across as lazy, that cut out a lot of the great things with Platinum, that do not understand the thematic, aesthetic reasons as to why they were good in the first place, the Sinnoh games, that I think straight up do not understand the magic of Sinnoh. I think straight up, not only Platinum is a better game, but Diamond and Pearl are better games than these significantly, for a lot of reasons to do with presentation and I guess the context surrounding the release. So by far, my least favorite is Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl. Now, to be clear, a lot of these entries, I am not going to be doing Pokemon Red, then Pokemon Yellow, then Pokemon Fire Red. I have this weird thing where in my mind, my feelings, most of the time, my feelings on a Pokemon generation are tied to the region. So when I rank my favorite, the Johto region, I'm talking about Gold, Silver, Crystal, Heart Gold, Soul Silver. To me, it's all cohesive in my feelings for it within the region. Most of the time, not all the time. So Brilliant, anyway, that's just something to do with the list. Ultra Sun would be next, and I don't think this is a bad game, but it kind of just didn't really do much for me upon playing it. I think it expanded upon some things in an interesting way, but mostly just felt like a watered-down Pokemon Black 2 and White 2 that didn't really do much for me. I felt like the revisit to... God, why am I blanking on the region name? How embarrassing. Alola. God. Alola. I thought the revisit to Alola left a lot to be desired, didn't really go in directions that I found interesting, and overall I just didn't find Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. Is that the other one? Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon? Whatever it is. To be all that interesting. 2 is harsh. I'll give it 2.5 out of 5. Then there's Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu. This is where we start getting... I guess Ultra Sun was okay as a game. This is where we start getting to games that I think are serviceable. Like, not good, necessarily, but solid enough to be net positives. Let's Go Pikachu. At this point, I think Kanto... By the time I played this in 2018, I was more than sick of Kanto. I didn't want to explore Kanto more, but I still played it, and maybe that's part of the reason that I wasn't super ready to commit to a revisit of Kanto, and maybe I would have enjoyed it more if I waited a year or two, but I played it nonetheless because I wanted more Pokemon. I always want more Pokemon. And it was decent, you know, it was solid enough. I think it was cool to revisit Kanto in a sort of new aesthetic that I think, as opposed to Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, which actively undercut the aesthetic sensibilities of the region, I think that Kanto looks decent in this game. It wasn't super interesting retread, it didn't do crazy out there things, but it did some neat things, and generally was an overall decent experience. Next, we have Pokemon Shield, and I think Pokemon Shield, Pokemon Shield and Sword and Pokemon Scarlet and Violet do have technical issues to varying extents. However, my problems with them are less to do with that, and more to do with, of course, it has an impact, but it's more to do with, I think, the storytelling very deliberately, very clearly moving away from the type of stories I love in Pokemon, along with a bit of emptiness and issues with that style. So part of this is a shift in style, and part of this is a lack of quality with regards to the style. I think the gameplay generally in a lot of these entries is fine. But when it comes to the region and the exploration and the progression and the narrative, it very much, we start going away from that setting-based storytelling in Generations 5, 6, 7. Sorry, that's setting-based storytelling in Generations 5, 6, 7. But I think we are solidly away from the type of presentation of narrative when we got to Pokemon Shield. And don't get me wrong, there are some definite positive things here in the narrative. I think it's a fun game. I had a fun time with it, but I definitely played this game feeling like Game Freak and Pokemon had entered a phase of its storytelling that had definitively become not for me. It had moved on from me, and I felt that was the case, and I was fine with that. But at the same time, this isn't ranking lower simply because of that. It's also because I just don't think the game is implemented very well. I think that there are some... I think that the towns can very often feel sparse in terms of the presentation. I think you can very clearly see NPC walk cycles, that NPCs that just disappear into the ether. Lots of little technical flubs that I alluded to that don't break the experience, but definitely hamper it, that really, really screw with immersion in the towns. I just don't think the towns are really that interestingly presented, really that they don't really pop much. I find that you can go back to Gen 3 or 4 and find towns that feel like they have much more personality than these towns a lot of the time. However, having said that, I find elements of the story to be really good. I like the legendary... I don't remember the names off the top of my head, but the scenes in the woods and a lot of the songs associated with the legendaries and the story of the legendaries and the history, to be really overall contributory to the plot and the themes, and interesting, and I appreciated that. I like the way that it varied up elements of the gameplay, and overall I think it was a solid entry, but one that also confirmed for me that maybe Pokemon just wasn't for me anymore. And that was further confirmed. A lot of what I felt about Pokemon Shield and Sword, I feel with Pokemon Scarlet, even more with regards to it moving on to a style of story that isn't necessarily for me, but just I think Scarlet and Violet are just overall a bit better than Shield and Sword. I think the gameplay is a bit more fun with regards to the way they vary things up and the progression and, I guess, the contrast from gyms. I just think that's implemented and reinforced with a bit more quality. I find the story a bit more engaging. I found the post-game in Scarlet to be really interesting, really cool. And a lot of the post-game in Scarlet I found was some of the best material in the game. I think the presentation's better. I think the towns feel less sparse. And because of all of this, it is ahead of Shield and Sword. While also, and it's a solid experience, while not being a favorite or anything, and being on the lower end-ish. But I finished Scarlet and Violet feeling generally like this is a solid experience that I enjoyed, but also feeling, yeah, Pokemon, maybe it isn't quite for me in the way it used to be. Was I correct in that? I guess we'll see going forward. Next up is Pokemon Colosseum. I have a lot of nostalgia for this one. If I were to play it today, maybe it would be a bit lower. Maybe it'd be around 17 or so. I don't know exactly. But nostalgia is a genuine metric for this. And I just have so many fond memories of playing this. This and Colosseum 2, I think generally... Let me actually just fix that. Colosseum 2... Oh no, so sorry. I'm spoiling myself a little bit. Because I do have Pokemon Colosseum 2 in this game. In this list. But yeah, I just found it very engrossing. I found the little narratives within it to be sort of very different from what I experienced up to that point, which was, at that time, the handhelds, first 3 generations, I think, maybe 4 by the time I played this. I don't really remember exactly, but I thought it was great. I really enjoyed it as a kid. I've revisited it in years since, and it's not quite held up as much as I loved it then, but it's still a very fun entry that I have lots of fond memories with. Then here is something I played recently, this year actually, that I've talked about this year a few times. Pokemon Legends ZA. I had a good time with this. I don't think it measures up to Legends Arceus, which I think is a incredible game that I love so much. And I don't think it has the setting-based storytelling, and that's okay. And I don't think it feels vast, and I have problems with it. Like, I think the gameplay can get monotonous. I think the way that the setting is used can get monotonous. It feels vast at first, and very quickly you can kind of understand that the game really isn't as big as you feel it might have seemed at first. And then by the end of it, I came away from it not thinking that this game was big at all. And that's okay, but I think it would have benefited from being bigger, from having a bigger scope. I think the gameplay changes were fascinating, and I really enjoyed it at first, but I think that the way that the gameplay was implemented was very repetitive. You found yourself doing the same thing over and over and over again through the bulk of the experience, and that wore thin. So those were negatives that dragged down the experience for sure for me. However, I found the characters to be lots of fun. I think this game looks quite good. I think it looks good. Is it like a Witcher 3 or a Breath of the Wild or a Tears of the Kingdom or Alan Wake? You know, is it one of the best looking games of its generation or in general? No, but I think it looks good. I like the aesthetic. I like the character designs. Pokemon to me has consistently always had some of the best character designs, even when the game's quality maybe went a bit down for me. I think the character designs are always great. That's the case with this. I love the character designs throughout it. They're very cute. They pop. They're very stark. And I think the story is a fun retread of elements of X and Y. I liked being in Lemio City again. I think the music is great. The music's tons of fun. Some of the battle themes are incredible bops. Some of the reimaginings of certain themes. And yeah, I found it to be a really fun experience that had a lower ceiling for me, but I liked it. I liked it quite a bit. Number 13, I'll put 12 and 13 together. Pokemon Snap. I love these games. I think they're tons of fun. Pokemon Snap has a bit more nostalgia and the novelty factor, so I put it ahead of New Pokemon Snap, but I think they're both pretty great. Pretty great Pokemon games. Very fun. That lets you see the... You know, when you're a kid, you always want to think of exploring in a way that's a bit more naturalistic than exploring these Pokemon regions in a way that's more naturalistic than, I guess, the more tailored single-player experience of the games, the mainline games. And these games do it very well. It's very fun to see these Pokemon in their habitats, a bit of trial and error to try new things and progress through and get different poses for the Pokemon, different Pokemon, getting them to evolve, seeing different areas of the island. I really have a lot of time for Pokemon Snap. I think it's a really fun series. Number 11 is a game, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Rescue Team DX. This is the only Mystery Dungeon game I think I played. There are some Pokemon games that I've not played. There are a couple of Mystery Dungeon games I've not played here. I think there's Pokemon Ranger games that I've not played. There are some games that are not in this list because I haven't played every Pokemon game ever. But yeah, I played Mystery Dungeon Rescue Team DX. I think it's lots of fun. And I think it approaches Pokemon from an interesting philosophical lens and explores Pokemon as a concept in a way that really hasn't been done since, from what I've experienced. That was really striking and really interesting when I played it. Don't remember exactly when I played it, a good few years ago now. But yeah, I think this is a very solid entry. And it approaches Pokemon from a narrative lens that I think is very different and very fun and very interesting. Very bold conceptually, somewhat philosophical. I really like it. Pokemon X. Pokemon X for me, X and Y, begin the top 10 for me. Now, I do think this Pokemon X and Y signaled the start of a shift in terms of quality and in terms of approach. Like I mentioned earlier, Generation 5, 6, 7. And I do think visually they didn't quite know what to do with this first shift into this sort of 3D style. I think Pokemon looked its best in Generations 2 to 5 or so. Here, it is a bit of an awkward middle child in trying to shift things into 3D. I think more modern Pokemon has gotten it together a bit more, but here it looks a bit awkward. Not to say it's really ugly. I still think there are elements of it that look good. I think people oversell how ugly they are. I just think it looks a bit awkward at times. The character designs melding with the world and all that, it doesn't really fit well. And to me, a big part of Pokemon is the aesthetic. Not necessarily that it has to be cutting edge or incredible fidelity, but an aesthetic cohesion. That every town merging with the character designs, merging with the battle presentation and the UI and everything, I think a big part of Pokemon feeling like a immersive experience is the aesthetic cohesion. And X and Y had a bit of trouble with that. I also think the main story, which gets a bit more focus here, is a bit underbaked in places. I like a lot of the towns, but I think this game also suffers in ways, like individually, I love towns like Snowbell City and Laverre City. They're some of my favorite in the whole series, but I think it suffers a little bit from geographical cohesion, where, you know, you're in Snowbell City, and literally a few paces to the west or east, and it feels like it's summer. Like, there was a bit more cohesion, a bit more smooth transitions geographically in other games, and that is something that really matters a lot to me. But I really enjoyed exploring Kalos. I really enjoyed it. I found the culture to be interesting. I had a great time with these games. I think they're good. Wholly positive, even in spite of them being more flawed. And yeah, I have a lot of time for X and Y, even though it's not quite a favorite, even though I can't quite say it's great. Next up is Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, and I really enjoyed this game. I think it does really interesting things with the atmosphere and the mood and the music and the presentation. I think it is a very sort of unorthodox and bold Pokemon story that I really enjoyed. And just, I think it's a bit grungier and darker conceptually. It sort of awakened me to sort of more experimental, interesting narrative ideas and and bits of presentation when I was younger, and I think this is a great game, Gale of Darkness, and a great evolution from Pokemon Colosseum. A really good sequel. Next, I would say, and baked into this, like I said before, I've divided what is it called? Let's Go Pikachu from these Kanto games, but baked into Fire Red is Red, Blue, Yellow, Fire Red, Leaf Green, right? The Kanto games, essentially. And they're all baked into this, so it's hard to talk about. I know it's a bit weird because the Red, Blue, Yellow, those games are broken as hell when it comes to gameplay mechanics. Certain types are just overpowered, certain moves just don't work. So, some strategies are completely null and void because of, I guess, some blind spots in the programming when it came to the gameplay. A lot of that's polished up in Fire Red and Leaf Green, and they're great remakes that really polish up a lot of that and legitimize their existence through polishing up a lot of that. I like Kanto a lot. I like the Kanto games a lot. I have a lot of nostalgia for them. I love certain towns like specifically Lavender Town. I think is so beautiful and atmospheric and haunting. And I have lots of iconic video game memories tied to Lavender Town, obviously, like a lot of people do. I think there's a really great ambience to Kanto. And I think they're very solid games, specifically Fire Red and Leaf Green, which, like I said, polish the games a lot. But obviously, as well, the introductory Pokemon games are iconic. They are stunning, revolutionary games that have a lot of problems, but you'd expect them to. I think the reason why Fire Red and Leaf Green and all the Kanto games are not higher is because Kanto, to me, like I said, I like Kanto. I like Lavender Town a lot. I love it. But Kanto, to me, overall, doesn't strike me much as a setting. I think Kanto is a platform and a foundation for the Pokemon formula, for them to sort of see what they were going to be doing narratively, the overall style, and there are bits of the brilliance of the setting-based storytelling and the brilliance of the lore and how it complements the story in Lavender Town, in elements of Cinnabar Island, and how, you know, it kind of alluded to elements of Mewtwo lore, for instance, and that sort of thing. And I think that's great. I think that's great. I like elements of the culture of Saffron City, for instance. The bustling Cerulean City. The port town, Vermilion. It's great. The culture surrounding Mount Moon and Pewter City, it's very well done. It's a well done setting, but it doesn't have that extra bit of richness and oomph. And to really elevate the Kanto games for me, to really capture my imagination in the way that other regions do. So Kanto's very good. It's very well done, and I think there's a lot of elements of it that you can see they expanded upon later, but they were cooking in here, but it doesn't hit that height to make it a great video game setting for me, which does limit it a little bit. So that's why it's just 8 on this list, but that's still a very impressive showing. We're getting to the point where I think the games are very good. Pokemon White version 2. I really like. I played White, but White and Black. I think this is a great sequel to Black and White. I think it expands upon the setting in a really interesting way. It builds up, it revisits elements of the setting, but also builds upon it through introducing new cities and giving, because this is 2 years later after Black and White, from what I remember, and gives a new complexion on the setting and how things have evolved since then. Revisits former characters who were in Black and White to see the impact that time and the events of the first games had on them, and then how that reflects in the narrative experience, which I think it examines lots of characters from Black in a really interesting way. It works as a great way to expand upon all that stuff really well, and there is so much content in here, and a lot of it's really good. I think a lot of people have this higher up than this. This is a huge compliment, this placing in my list. I don't have much to complain about. I would just say I think that maybe the narrative doesn't strike me quite as much as it does other people. It isn't quite as powerful for me, though I still think it's very good, very solid. I love the presentation, and I love the sheer amount of passion poured into this. There is so much content. I think for me, a lot of the extra stuff isn't quite what I look for in a Pokemon game, and I didn't find it super interesting, but it's not a negative, it's just, I guess, a lack of a positive for me, when it might be for other people. Black 2 and White 2, great entries, really, really good, great sequels to Black and White. Number 6 on my list would be Pokemon Sun and Moon. I think some people kind of don't like these games. I have a lot of time for Sun and Moon. I think they're great. And I think after a little bit of a dip in Pokemon X and Y, I played these and I was obsessed. I really, really enjoyed them. I think this is where the aesthetics don't look amazing in the overworlds, but look better. I think the battles look better. I think the overworld looks better. I think the character designs pop better. And I think the music's really great. I think this, while the narrative isn't presented through the setting in the way that the prime of the Pokemon series to me did it, I think the setting of Alola is very interesting. The different islands, the very ingrained culture, there's a richness there. There's tons of thought put into it. And then the characters, oh my gosh. This might have one of my favorite character casts in Pokemon. Lillian, Lusamine, and Gladios, and, Marnie, and what was the team name? Team Skull. Sorry, Marnie Marnie isn't in this game. But Team Skull and the music, Team Skull, the music is so good. I never found myself through these games ever really feeling the disillusionment with them that I've seen other people feel. I think the setting's great, the music's great. Is it a bit more linear? Yeah. Could there be a bit more exploration? Sure. There is certain things it is lacking in certain positives that other games have. A certain, I guess, magic maybe that transcends them from great games to maybe masterful games, but I still think Pokemon Sun and Moon are great. I have a lot of time for them, a lot of love for them. And some nostalgia for them as well. And yeah, Lily's character arc in it is some of the best character work in any Pokemon game. Great character work in this game. But into the top 5, and we have Pokemon Black. I consider Pokemon Black to be borderline part of the prime of Pokemon. Black and White 2. Black 2 and White 2. The sequels as well. While very slightly starting to shift away from the approach I like, but still not lacking in any of the richness, and also giving us what, to me, I think N is the best character in any Pokemon game, which is a huge positive. The journey's great. I love Unova as a region through its thematics. I made an hour, 20-minute video about Unova's thematics. I think it's really, really well done. You can check that out. I'll maybe link that in the description if I remember. As well as the other Pokemon videos I've checked out, I've made. And yeah, I won't belabor the point because I talk about this for 80 minutes, like I said, but Pokemon Black and White are really great games, stunning games, that do so much with their plot and themes, and again, the setting-based storytelling, it shifts a little bit away from that, but it's still very much there. It's very much a focus. It's a huge primary focus. And I think this is a lot of people's favorite Pokemon game from what I've heard. This, along with Black 2 and White 2, and with great reason. They're fantastic games, and they are borderline favorite games of mine. Love the Pokemon, love the enhanced presentation. This is just like peak pixel art sort of thing and presentation. And yeah, they're great games. But number 4, actually, these used to be, up until a couple months ago, number 5, Pokemon Black. They used to be number 4. Now they're number 5 because number 4 is Pokemon Legends Arceus. I guess I'm spoiling. Hold on, I'll just leave it there. I have a whole video where I talked about how much I love this game, But I guess what makes the Pokemon games go from borderline favorites like Pokemon Black for me into genuine favorites like Arceus and the 3 games above it is that sense of magic, is that sense of beauty and sentiment and spirit in the setting that is there to an extent in Black and White and Sun and Moon, but not quite to the masterful extent that it's there in Legends Arceus. This is one of my highlights of the year, finally checking out Pokemon Legends Arceus on the Switch 2, where it ran perfectly, basically, 99% of the time. A couple of slight FPS losses here and there with stuff in the distance, but other than that, perfectly. And I was just stunned at how much I love this. I made a video about this early in the year, like I said, and it remains one of the highlights of 2026 for me. It's an incredible game, and went into my favorites. It's not like, top 5, 10 material favorite, because it doesn't, there are some limitations it has. It has its limited amount of things that it wants to do, which is really paying homage to the setting and showing the beauty of Sinnoh through the love letter that it is, varying up the gameplay, making things more naturalistic, really building on the Sinnoh lore in the way that only a Pokemon game that is a labor of love like this can. Does really interesting character work with a couple of characters, and then it integrates music in such a beautiful way. Oh my gosh, the Jubilife song and how it's integrated to the evolution of the set, it's incredible. I was grinning the entire 40 to 50 hours I was playing this. I could not, you could not wrestle me away from this game. It was such a breath of fresh air. It made me feel like a kid again, and it reinvigorated all the magic of these Pokemon settings that I love so much. And I know that since this game, there's been a couple of releases that haven't been as good as it, but even in spite of that, the fact that this came out, and it is a modern Pokemon game, really showed me that Game Freak still has it. They can still pull this out. And it's made me very optimistic about Wind and Waves. I know there isn't necessarily a ton of logic there, because I haven't even looked into the staff, if there's continuity there. I know there's ZA, and it's been there since then, and it's not as good as Legends, but I still like ZA. But I get it. There's been a bit of a dip since Legends Arceus. Lots of people tell me that. I get it, but I can't help but illogically, irrationally, but somewhat rationally, have faith for Wind and Waves. The increased development time, the way that the setting looks, even though I could do with it being not another summerish setting, I could do with that, but that's okay. I'm so excited to explore Wind and Waves, and I'm more excited for it because I've seen that modern Game Freak, modern Pokemon can pull something great out. More than great. Borderline masterful. And Legends Arceus is a great example of that. For more specifics about what I love about it, you can check out my video on it in this channel from a few months ago. But yeah, it's incredible. Number 3 is Pokemon Soul Silver. And Heart Gold, and all the Johto games. I have such beautiful, beautiful memories. I would go to my grandma's cottage, my grandma and grandpa's cottage when I was so young, and just pound Pokemon Crystal while being around the campfire. And I was kind of, I wasn't ignoring my family, but once in a while I did want to whip out the Pokemon Crystal to play it, to ignore them a little bit. So I have a lot of nostalgia and beautiful memories tied to this. I played this with my cousins, the Pokemon Crystal and Gold and Silver. I have so much nostalgia tied to this game, the Hoenn games, and the Sinnoh games. But these are it's almost like I have so much nostalgia for Fire Red, and for the Kanto games, and my youngest memories are tied to those parts of the Kanto games, but I'm so nostalgic for them that it loops around to not be nostalgic anymore. I don't know, maybe it's the revisits of Kanto, but my most nostalgic memories start with the Johto games. The music, they are perfect sequels. They really are. And Johto really enhanced upon the foundations laid in Kanto to make this beautiful, rich, evocative, spiritual setting that really, really pays heed to the past and the cultures ingrained in the society within and interacting throughout the towns. Again, I have a big old video on Johto on my main channel. I'll link that. You can check that out. But third place would be Soul Silver. The only reason it's not higher, I guess, is I think that some of the experience of the remakes, which I think are the definitive version of the games, is hampered by there being some problems in the mid-game with, I guess, level scaling. There are stretches of the game where you are fighting Pokemon that are super easy. It's very hard to level. The level scaling's very uneven. And I guess just the regions of Hoenn and Sinnoh just hit a bit more than Johto, but Johto's right there with them. And so that is a great segue into Pokemon Emerald version, the Hoenn games. And in this, I include Omega Sapphire and Alpha Ruby. I know people don't like them as much. I think they're great games and among my favorites. And I tie them in with my feelings for Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald. It all comes down to Hoenn, man. The aesthetics are beautiful. Hoenn as a region is one of the best video game settings I've ever seen, and I love it in both the original games and the remakes. I really enjoy what Omega Sapphire and Alpha Ruby add to it. Are there a couple of missteps? Yeah. Are there some things that are better in Emerald? Yeah, but I still think they're awesome games, and it just comes down to Hoenn and the music and the aesthetics and the thematics. Again, I got a video on the Hoenn games out there if you're interested in a big deep dive on those games and why they're incredible and why I gush so much about them. And I'll leave it to those games. Likewise, I will do so for my number one, which is Pokemon Platinum. Pokemon Legends Arceus, Pokemon Black, Soul Silver, Heart Gold, Emerald. They're all awesome games. These are some of my favorite games ever. These games have shaped me. And I have immense nostalgia for the Hoenn games as well. Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald. So many great memories playing Animal Crossing with my cousins at my house on these summer evenings, just letting the days go by because we were out of school, where one of us would play Animal Crossing on the GameCube in 20 to 30 minute shifts. The rest of us would play Pokemon Ruby while watching them. And then we'd shift, right? Just so nostalgic for this. I think of Hoenn and I can smell summer barbecues. You know, I can hear cicadas. I digress. I love them. I love these games. But without a doubt, the best game for me is Pokemon Platinum. And I include Diamond and Pearl in it because Sinnoh is my favorite region. It's very close, but it's just about my favorite region. I also have nostalgia for this at a bit of an older time in my life, but still nonetheless, than those other generations, but still nonetheless so nostalgic for them. And I don't know, it just Platinum hits in every regard. I have no problems with this game. I have a couple of problems with Diamond and Pearl that are then helped out with Platinum with regards to Pokemon availability and some of the pacing, like the games are kind of slow, and an expansion of the setting. But thematically, aesthetically, in terms of the setting-based storytelling, this is the peak of Pokemon to me. It really is. Sinnoh, there is nothing like it. Sinnoh is home. And that's a big part of the reason that I kind of love Legends Arceus as much as I do. But yeah. That's my number one. Again, deep dive on it on my main channel if you're interested. Yeah, I love Pokemon. I have hope for the future. Hopefully Wind and Waves could be on the top end of this list this time next year when I'm talking about it, if I talk about it. We'll see. Anyways, thank you so much for joining me in this big Pokemon deep dive ranking rumination. Feel free to share me your rankings or your thoughts on some of the games you played. So what are your favorites? What do you value in Pokemon games? What do you think about modern Pokemon? Feel free. I'd love to hear. And yeah, let me know about your thoughts on my ranking, if you agree, disagree, all that's good stuff. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.